What's up, everybody? Today we're joined by co-host and friend of the show, Tucker, known amongst his fellow propagandists as Tucker Snarlson. And we're headed off into the jungle to try and find the remains of Vietnam's last leper colony, having been shut down and abandoned over 3 decades ago. Because we're a lighthearted and fun channel, let's get a little into the horrors of leprosy as we head off to our point of descent into the jungle. Most people have heard of it. Depending on location, most people know of it from the story of Jesus healing 10 lepers. Nowadays, it's easily curable with a mixed drug treatment, or MDT, but if left untreated, can be very serious. The global availability of medication has made it a much less significant health risk than it was in the past, but here in Southeast Asia is still one of the most prominent places in the world for modern infections. Although the aforementioned medicine means that it doesn't come with the same fears attached, and most countries report less than 1,000 cases per year. All information on leprosy specifically that we include in this episode is sourced from the World Health Organization, so if you feel we have anything incorrect, take it up with the WHO. Anyway. It is a communicable disease, meaning that it travels between hosts via bacteria that floats around on water droplets in the breath, and mainly affects the respiratory system, but also the eyes and skin, leading to significant visual impacts that have historically led people suffering from the disease to face really fucked up levels of stigmatization and discrimination. Places all over the world have made use of these leper colonies to segregate infected individuals and their families in attempts to minimize the possibility of wider spread within their respective societies. Vietnam was no different in this regard. What stands out is that the final colony was only abandoned in 1991, much later than similar facilities in other countries around the world, and we'll touch on why this was a little later, but let's pause for directions. If you head north out of the city of Da Nang in central Vietnam, you'll start to head over the Hai Van Pass. Famous as an engineering feat of the French Empire, putting train tracks through these mountains and some of the most stunning views along the entire north-south route. Also, just a very fun road to drive on the bike. Anyway. About a third of the way up the mountain, there is a Lookout Cafe, which is absolutely worth stopping at for a coconut and chill if you're driving this route, even if you're not going to do this hike. From this cafe, we're going to head down to the beach. It's really not much of a path, so if you're going to do it, wear real shoes. Anyway, as we enjoy this lovely little hike down the mountainside, let's get back to the nice happy stuff, Hansen's disease, the modern medical name for leprosy. Lighthearted. Placing patients in these colonies has long gone the way of bloodletting, disproven and shown to be unscientific. But as most things throughout history, science didn't facilitate the development of these colonies, but rather good old-fashioned fear and prejudice. In medieval time, lepers were made to carry essentially a cowbell when they walked around, so people were warned to avoid them. Rough. The disease is actually far less contagious than is generally believed, with huge portions of the global population having natural immunity to it, and even if you come in contact with someone who has it, only prolonged and intimate exposure can lead to a transfer. A small bacterial load is ineffective at establishing itself in a host. Anyway, directions. As we make it down to the beach, guest host Tucker, known among his fellow oligarchs as Bart Tuckerberg, will lead the way. Head north along this first beach, Long Van Beach, named after a nearby village. It's honestly a beautiful beach, worth the hike down itself. And it's only one of 3 along this patch of coastline, lined with coconut trees and a beautiful view of Da Nang. The trail that we came down is popular among local hikers, so you may see some of them here. Otherwise, you'll probably have these kilometers of sand all to yourself. A pleasant change from the crowded beaches in the city. Now, as we make it through this last strip of beach, let's consider why it took all the way up until 1991 for this place not to be needed anymore. After the American War was won and Vietnam was free, this was obviously not acceptable to the Americans, notoriously sore losers. As they could no longer sustain all the brutality and war crime stuff, they changed to what has, by now, become standard protocol for the war machine: sanctions. As brilliantly laid out in the highly recommended book Sanctions as War, the purpose of sanctions isn't to apply pressure on some elites, as talking heads may claim, but to inflict as much economic hardship and poverty as possible on as broad a segment of society as possible, in an attempt to turn the people against the government, inciting a little rebellion against it, or for the government to fold to public pressure and they negotiate some kind of deal, allowing foreign businesses access to local markets, cheap factory workers, and the like. Just as China did in 1978 and Vietnam went on to do so in 1986. For instance, Cuba is not poor because of Cuba. Once foreign companies are allowed to extract value from the company, then restrictions are loosened on what is allowed to be sold into the country. This means that new medicines and pharmaceuticals could be brought in. When they were, leprosy was essentially eradicated from the country. I'm just going to jump in here to say that we can't keep the whole episode on such light topics as infectious disease and economic warfare. We've got to touch on a sad topic too. The publishing of this video was pushed back a week as we learned that unfortunately, this entire area has been flattened for a new luxury development. This whole place will be luxury condos and 5-star hotels soon. Development's gonna develop, or however that saying goes. But it's sad that such an interesting historic site and such a beautiful environment is now lost to the world. I suppose that's a good motivator to go out and explore now. Change will never be anything but inevitable, so go see the world right now for how it currently is before it isn't. Philosophy dog aside, fun fact is that the only animal other than humans that can contract leprosy is the armadillo. Fuck you, armadillos. I've always thought they needed to be taken down a notch. Anyway, if that wasn't a happy enough note to end on, doilebe ko, moisa deoko. Life is suffering. Everything is suffering. So have fun out there, folks. Click that like button, pause, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.